as part of researching for this, even I did ChatGPT. Okay. And I gave a really cool big prompt. I'm so proud of myself about the big size of the prompt that I gave. And ChatGPT said, okay, you should start your trip with Chennai because that's where the novel opens. I'm like, hey, they didn't call out Vandiyathevan, but they said the novel opens. I'm like, Chennai was never featured there. So then I again started giving them better prompts, but it still didn't pick up that the first spot is anywhere near Viranam or anything close to that. So then I absolutely give it up. That's ChatGPT. You really need to know the answer also just to show if the structure of the answer is correct or not.
In which case, you might as well not research only, right?
I just wanted
you're wrong.
I wanted to. And then I gave a prompt saying that the book does not open in Chennai. Can you please retry? Oh, I am sorry. And then again.
So, aren't we all using ChatGPT these days for our assignments, our projects, our Instagram posts? But it looks like it clearly doesn't give the right travel plans. So maybe you can only trust misadventures of a sneaker when it comes to the perfect travel plan.
Yes, that's us, guys. All travel recommendations plus Masti wala travel bucker, everything here. So hi, welcome to another episode of Misadventures of a Sneaker, a travel podcast where we listen to much more well-researched itinerary, not the ChatGPT kinds. And of course, like we said, Masti, Bakar and lots more. I am Revati, and with me we have my favorite co-host, Godly.
Hello there. So a few months back, I was watching the movie Ponniyin Selvan, and I was blown away by the way the palaces looked there. It's not like the first time I've seen a palace, but I am very, very curious to know how it actually looked like back then or how it looks right now and all of that. So Revati, you are like such a traveler. So how many palaces have you seen that look so majestic where you felt like, ooh, I totally want to live there?
Oh my God, like a queen and all that. So of course the Rajasthan ones are all of them are my favorite ones. So the one in Bikaner, Jaipur, Udaipur, all of them. I love the Mysore Palace because during the day it's okay, but at night when they put the lights on, to just pagal ho jaoge tum log, ekdam pagal ho jaoge.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. So Mysore Palace, yes. There are other ones that were really impressive. So you have the Falaknuma Palace in Hyderabad. And many of these palaces that you're saying have actually been converted into a hotel. So for example, the Falaknama in Hyderabad is now a Taj Falaknama. So we actually can go and live in these palaces. Of course, we have to afford it, which is very difficult. Experience kidney dena hoga. But actually we can go and experience living in one of these majestic palaces. But yes, I love the one in Ponniyin Selvan as well. It looks like so dreamlike, and I really wish that those palaces were still around in good condition and we could go and actually visit them. What about you, Godly? Any of your favorite palaces that you've been to?
So other than the Rajasthan ones, right? Of course, every time we hear palaces, I think the first word that comes to our mind is definitely Rajasthan. I think almost. So other than that, I remember this palace called Coach Bihar Palace. It's in West Bengal. And interestingly, it's the inspiration behind this palace is the Buckingham Palace.
Ooh.
Yeah, like I would have never thought in my dreams.
Yeah, was this kind of made in the British India days?
Yeah, probably yes. It was built during the British era, I believe. But yeah, I remember it being very beautiful, and from every single room, the view was just really, really pretty.
I love these stories that India has, such historical stories behind every fort, every palace. It's really enchanting to see because every single story is so unique.
And talking about unique and enchanting tales, today we are doing this amazingly unique trail, which has been made even more popular by the Ponniyin Selvan books and the mega blockbuster movie Ponniyin Selvan series. And this is also the first time that we have two guests on our show, George and Sangeetha, who have done this trail.
Yoo-hoo, guys. So today's conversation, let's start off with you, George. So for our listeners, George is a really good friend, and our kind of traveling style matches a lot. So I've done a lot of my tripping along with George in several of the years that both of us have known each other. So George has formerly worked in the travel industry for several years. So personally for me, besides being great company, George also does a lot of interesting research before he comes on any trip. Some offbeat kind of tidbits he finds out. इस गली में ये बेस्ट मिलता है, वहां का पानी पूरी बेस्ट मिलता है, that particular temple has that kind of history and things like that. So it's always great fun traveling with him. मस्ती भी हो जाता है and all R&D भी ऐसे मिल जाता है. So I'm very excited to have you in our conversation today, George. So hi.
Thanks, Revati. Thanks for inviting me. To contextualize and then give you an introduction of myself. My name is George. I love traveling. I have been traveling for pretty much the last 15, 20 years in different parts of India, different parts of the country, the world. And this podcast, we would be discussing a lot around Ponniyin Selvan, the Chola period, and the different temples that they have built, and some of the towns that they have ruled. And this trip, my wife and I did from Bangalore all the way down to Madurai, covering a bunch of towns in between, and then drive back. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow, this road trip must have been one hell of a trip, right? It's really nice seeing you today, George. I have heard so much about you. Also, we have with us is Sangeetha, a very dear friend of mine. We hung out pretty often in Chennai. Sangeetha is someone who's a bookworm, and she's also one of my favorite artists. And she's someone that we can talk about anything, starting from movies, from series to history, name it. And maybe I already have had a conversation with her about it. So today she's gonna share her experience of doing the Ponniyin Selvan trip, basically going around all the temples from that period in southern India. Actually, she has been doing it ever since she was a child. So, hi there, Sangeetha.
Hi, Godly. Hi, Revati. I really look forward to this chat.
So, I've loved watching the Ponniyin Selvan movies, but I was wondering, Sangeetha, since you are a bookworm, did you read the Ponniyin Selvan books as a child, or was it a recent read?
I must first admit that when I grew up mostly on a diet of Enid Blyton books and Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I am embarrassed to say that I never read any books in my own mother tongue in Tamil until I was much, much older. Although I remember that every time I would appreciate Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, I would go all hoo-ha and ha-ha about it. My mother was always gaga about this character called Vandiyadevan in Ponniyin Selvan. She had spoken about it many times in my childhood. So much later, just out of sheer intrigue, and my Tamil reading fluency was never so great. Admittedly, I can read the book, but I still preferred reading the entire Ponniyin Selvan series through an audio book. And if someone wants a good audio book and not a narrative of the audio book, I'd love to leave the link to the audiobook that I used to listen to the entire Ponniyin Selvan series. She has read it around. A lady called Deepika Arun, who has read it aloud, and she's done a brilliant job. And that's what introduced me to this story.
Wow.
And unlike George, I wasn't that curious to do an entire Ponniyin Selvan tour. But having been raised in Tamil Nadu, I think out of serendipity and out of sheer childhood torture, we were taken to many temples across Tamil Nadu, many of which are still remnants of the Sora era.
And now, out of all this parampara, your kids are experiencing this entire experience of going around the Chola set of temples, is it?
Same love and affection.
Yeah, same love and affection. But I also add audiobooks. I make them do some amount of research as we record in 2023 for the next travel destinations, my children are doing their research using ChatGPT. I don't know how authentic it is going to turn out to be, but that is a current source.
So as a part of researching for this, even I did ChatGPT. Okay. So I gave a really cool big prompt. I'm so proud of myself about the size of the prompt that I gave. And ChatGPT said, okay, you should start your trip with Chennai because that's where the novel opens. I'm like, hey.
That's where
the novel opens. Like that's where they didn't call it Vandiyadevan, but they said the novel opens. I'm like, Chennai was never featured there. So then I again started giving them better prompts, but it still didn't pick up that the first spot is anywhere near Viranam or anything close to that. So then I absolutely give it up. That's ChatGPT. You really need to know the answer also just to show if the structure of the answer is correct or not.
In which case, you might as well not research only, right?
Yeah, through ChatGPT. Maybe if I had asked questions like where do I eat, or what are the 4 things in Tanjavur, then it gives me a better idea. But I think it wasn't able to connect it back to the Ponniyin Selvan or Vandiyathevan's route as an answer. So probably that's where it missed that link.
Well, that's bad because the book is there. It's translated in English as well. So it should have picked up something.
Yeah,
I don't think it's available for free, right? ChatGPT has to be trained.
Probably.
Very nice.
But I think, George, what ChatGPT was really thinking about when it gave you the answer was which airport to land and begin your trip.
Even then, Trichy, yeah. Why would they go Chennai? Yeah. And even though I'm asking you to regenerate, I did it 3 times. I just wanted you to.
Wrong.
I wanted to. And then I gave a prompt saying that the book does not open in Chennai. Can you please retry? Oh, I am sorry. And then again, I should send you guys the script so you can paste it somewhere.
I know, seriously, you should. Okay, take a screenshot or something and send it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, George, many of our listeners who be listening to our podcast don't really know you that well. And, what we thought is there are different ways how they can get to know the person whom they're going to be listening to in the next, an hour or so of the podcast. So what really is the George USP? Let me see if I'll find something new about you as well when you introduce yourself.
Very interesting question. So let me take a second. So I like food, and I like to experiment with food, different kinds of food. So this goes with the restaurants within the city that I'm living, or when I'm traveling, and even if it's a local dhaba or a good, named restaurant within that city, I would like to experiment. What's the local food? What's the local culture? I love coffee, and I love to try different kinds of coffee. I make coffee at home. Happy to offer coffee to people who come home and explain to them the various different aspects within coffee, and not just Nescafe and brew that most Indians drink. And another thing that I really like is different kinds of beer. So that is another thing that I look for when I go either visiting different pubs in the city or when I travel.
So in our friend circle, most of our retirement plans are based on George's coffee shop. We are all associating ourselves with different roles that we'll do in your cafe. So I'm the front desk. My husband said he's going to be the librarian. George's wife cooks really well, like really, really well. So she'll be taking care of the cafe part of making all the exciting food. So all are.
It's nice to have a lot of pipe dreams, but let's see if this one comes true. Yeah,
I really hope so.
A cute, quaint cafe somewhere on the hills sounds interesting, no? But, yeah. This will be quaint, have like some 20 visitors a day. We just, yeah.
Yeah, we should do this. I'm very excited.
So, Sangeetha, ditto question for you as well. I know you pretty well, but I'm sure other people don't. And I have received a lot of book recommendations from you. So maybe you can share with everyone else as well some books which are like really, really close to you and has always stayed with you.
Well, if you have to talk about books that have always stayed with me, it's Jane Austen. I'm a huge diehard fan of Jane Austen. And I think I started reading it when I was in middle school. And to this day, I will have a Jane Austen book on me wherever I go. Apart from that, 2 of my favorite books. One is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's one of my absolute all-time favorites. The other would be Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. But I'm a huge fan of Chronicles of Narnia also. I've enjoyed reading multiple genres, and I continue to enjoy reading. I have daughters who are tweens, and I enjoy reading all the books that they read also.
I think I have found some best Jane Austen books at your place, and I love them. And the habit of reading children's book is something that I learned from you, because you used to give me, your children's books, and I think I really started enjoying it from then.
No, but also we should all be envious of the children who live in today's day and age. They have the choice, the breadth and variety of choice of books that they have, especially in the genre of fantasy. It's incredible. None of us grew up with that kind of breadth. So yeah, today's day and age kids, I am envious of my kids.
I agree.
Fundu set of books you have mentioned, Sangeeta. Awesome ones. Like if you're talking of kids' books, now my favorite is always Calvin and Hobbes. The cutest but most intelligent kind of humor I feel in those books. I love them. Now, talking from books and movies and all, we are moving into our Ponniyin Selvan conversation. This podcast is really special for both Godly and me. And I'll tell you why, guys, because when we were thinking of bringing on this episode, I remember that George has been on this entire tour with his wife, Aarti, several years back, even before the movies even came around. The book was really popular then, but it wasn't really something that everyone knew about. So it was very special when he came and told us the stories of the entire Ponniyin Selvan trail that he went on. And when I was discussing this whole thing with Godly mentioned that Sangeetha has read the entire series written by Kalki. Kalki is the author, Kalki Krishnamurti, who wrote the entire Ponniyin Selvan series. And not just that, Godly actually mentioned that Sangeetha has been on this entire, not really trail at one time, but the entire set of temples as a child and now taking her children there as well. So she's a pro there too. Henna, Godly?
Right. I agree. So this episode is going to be slightly different from the episodes that we did before. We'll be talking a lot about connection with the blockbuster movie, history of the Chola period, and a lot of beautiful architecture.
And listeners, by the way, just letting you know, some of us will be saying Chola because we can't do the Sora pronunciation properly. So you will hear Chola sometimes and Sora sometimes. Dono ek hi hai, so chinta mat karo. So let me start off with you, George. As we start having this discussion on the entire Ponniyin Selvan tour that you went on, first tell me, how did you guys even think about going on this particular tour, making this particular itinerary and all of that? Or how much of the history did you already know about, or did you do pura R&D and then go for your entire Ponniyin Selvan trail? Tell us something about all of that.
So I put it into two parts. You asked two different questions, so I'll answer them separately. So for the history part, I was very curious about it, and I am still curious about different parts of India, especially South India, because it does not get a lot of coverage in the rest of the country, rest of the world. Specifically for this trip, that full credit goes to my wife. She is a hardcore Kalki follower. She's read books from him much before the movie, much before this, and much before the podcast that we've all heard after that. So she's the one who read it. She read it in English, and I think the last one or the last two are not there in English, so she struggled and read it with Tamil, though that's not her second language also. Yeah, and then she put together the certain districts that we need to cover or certain temples that we need to cover and so on. And back then I was working with a travel company, so it was easier for me to find other stuff allied to it. So, places to eat, places to visit, and all the other things that follow this trail, if you could say. Though we moved a lot away from Ponniyin Selvan per se, it was more around the exploration of the different Tamil kingdoms back then, as against the route that Vandiyadevan or Ponniyin Selvan followed throughout. So there will be a lot of differences when I talk versus what probably Sangeetha speaks, because I didn't actually cover, I didn't go to Nagapattinam and so on. So there will be a lot of differences, but we'll see how the narration flows.
George, just to set everybody's heart at rest, neither did I follow the exact route of Vandiyadevan from beginning to end. Although admittedly, I must mention this, that very recently when I was going back and reading the book 5 of Ponniyin Selvan, only then I did realize that the opening shot of the book is with Ponniyin Selvan riding his horse and coming along that Veeranam lake, right?
Yeah.
The closing shot is also exactly the same place.
On the same lake.
Yeah, exactly. Just leaving.
So I did that. So I went to the Veeranam lake and it was beautiful. I think back then it would have been much different. If you look at the origins, probably he went around the month of September, August, Adi Masam, I think that's what the reference is.
The Adi is July and August.
July and August, yeah. Okay. But I went in December. Okay. So, and they say that's the time for harvest back then. But I think now it's shifting because of whatever reasons. So when I went, I saw Veeranam Lake full, and I saw a lot of paddy fields and everything else ripe to be harvested. So I saw the greener part of TN, which if you go in other times, probably you'll see only brown part of the TN. So that way I was lucky. So Veeranam I covered. Down that, I didn't go beyond Madurai, for example. So that my thing cut off at Madurai, and then we drove back to Bangalore. So that's where it was.
Wonderful. So this whole trip, so which places did you cover? And how did you plan your itinerary? So we have to go here, we have to go there, we have to go there, and all of those things.
Question to me or Sangeetha?
Only all these questions are only for you, Josh, because you're the one who's actually done the Ponniyin Selvan trip.
Got it. Okay. So planning for the trip was, how do I put this? So my wife Aarti, she knew the major spots that we had to cover. So then it's the regular planning that we do. We open the Google Maps, we draw the chart out, figure out what are the nicer places to stay. So for example, when I said I visited Veeranam Lake.
George, 1 second. Is it, I mean, I don't know if I mispronounced it. I think in the book, he says Veeranarayaneri.
Correct. But I think now it is called Veeranam.
I wanted to be sure. Huh?
Yes, it is now called Veeranam Lake.
Just for our listeners to understand, in the book, Kalki refers to the lake that George is talking about as the Veeranarayaneri. I think in modern day times, we call it just the Veeranam Lake.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
No, so for me, it's Veeranam Lake because I have done this entire tour through YouTube and Google. So I've read as Veeranam Lake.
So so Veeranam Lake, for example, does not have like a great Airbnb or even a half decent hotel nearby. And I'm talking about 5-6 years ago. Maybe things have changed now after the movie. Probably it will change for the better. So we had to find some town nearby where we could stay for the night, which was basically a farmhouse kind of a setting where we just stayed for the night. We drove down, saw the lake, sat by the lake during sunset. It was really beautiful. And then we went to this place. This place had I think it's still called pump set in English. I don't know if you guys have seen it. So this is basically from the well, you pump out water and the water is used for irrigation of our home purposes. So it's that kind of a setting. It's like really rural kind of a setting. And we just stayed one night over there. But our trip started in Kanchipuram. We wanted to avoid the Chennai and Mahab's part of it, though it would have been part of the same tour, but we've done it multiple times before. So we started with Kanchipuram. We saw the old Pallava related architecture there. And then we moved southwards right up to Madurai, where after covering all the Cholas, we went to where the Pandya stories are there. And then, and Madurai is also the highlight of the food tour of this region. So that's how the planning happened. So we just went geographically starting from Bangalore right to the south till we can cover, and then we drove back home.
So all these places that you drove by, how many of these were in complete ruins, or were they very well maintained? Can tourists just go and see them, or is it something like Harappan civilization or something, absolute ruins?
Okay, let me go sequentially. So Kanchipuram had a very good UNESCO covered temple. I think it is called the Kailasanatha temple, which is also where where Rajaraja Chola found his inspiration to build the Periya Kovil or the Brihadishwara temple later on. That is UNESCO protected. It is very nicely done and all that. And then there are a few other temples of interest, which are living temples. When I say living temples, it means prayers happen there daily. So even though it may be under UNESCO or any architectural protection, ASI protection, but they are also where prayers are happening. So you will find both these kind of things in parallel. Some where the prayers have stopped is just a tourist structure versus where there are things happening today. It is pretty much well protected, but if you do the true Ponniyin Selvan trail, which is, you have a bunch of those tours now online, a lot of those things like the palaces that they refer to are completely ruins now, because multiple invasions have happened over the period of time. Everyone looted everything, so you would only see ruins. You would see this is where Kadambur Palace was, right? So that's all. That's only the reference, and you'll hear a lot of stories there. But at this point, you'll only see bricks. It won't even look like a palace. For example, I didn't go that side. I pretty much restricted my tour towards all the temples. We spend a lot of time, like 2 hours or 3 hours for each of those temples, going around, going under the inner sanctum, and so on. So that's what it is. The Madurai temple is a living temple, obviously, and it's beautifully maintained. So so that's a little bit about how it looks.
What I recall when you were speaking about the structures that are in ruins versus the ones that are still in a good condition. So everything that is still in a reasonably good condition and well maintained is a temple. So palaces or places of stay have lost their relevance. So for example, the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram predates the Chola rule.
Yeah.
It was built by the Pallavas. So I think it's around 700 AD or something, or maybe 8th century.
Whoa, that's really an amazing fact, because considering today's construction doesn't even last a few years, and here we see temples which are like more than 1,000, 2,000 years old and still standing strong. Like, I don't know what kind of sorcery was it back then. But I'm just wondering, like, other than temples, is there anything else that we can explore in Tanjavur?
So while you're visiting Tanjavur, there's one more place that you could potentially consider visiting as a remnant of the Sora era. It's a dam that was built about 2000 years ago by a king called Aditya Karihalan. Although the name Aditya Karihalan is the same as one of the characters who features in the Ponniyin Selvan novel, these are not the same kings. They are about 900 years apart. The Kallanai Dam that I'm talking about was built, I think, in 150 AD. This was a period during which a Sora dynasty did rule Tamil Nadu. I think they're called the early Soras or some such name. The Soras we generally refer to, Rajaraja Soran and his son Rajendra Soran. They are called, I think, the later Soras. But still, because you're traveling all the way there to Tanjavur, and if you do have some time, the Kallanai Dam, which was built by the Aditya Karihalan in 150 AD, is the world's 4th oldest dam, and it is still functional to this day as a dam. It's definitely an engineering marvel. I remember taking my children there, and they were like, I've seen so many hydropower stations. This one looks like duh. Like, what are you talking about as a grand marvel? And then it was hard to explain to them that imagine 2000 years old when engineering was not what it is today. There were no machines and equipments. And imagine moving such a huge boulder across a river, against the current of a river to take it and leave it there. What did people use then? So, a lot of it is imagination for us.
True that, yeah.
So to save our face, we also drove right up to what is today called the Mukkombu Dam, which was built, it's called the Upper Anaikat Dam, I think, which was built in the British era. The advantage of taking any child there is that there's a big park with lots of swings, so they'll forget that their parents took them on a trip to see an engineering marvel. But as a remnant of the Sora era, the Kallanai Dam to this day stands the test of time. In India, it is the oldest dam, and it is still a functional dam. So it's a nice idea to take your family there, or you take your own self there to see these things.
So see, if you see, Kaveri starts somewhere in Karnataka, today's Karnataka, and then flows all the way down through Trichy and down, right? So Bangalore forever had great rains and good weather. So you have good rain. So water was always there in Kaveri, and that pretty much got reason why the area around Trichy, Tanjavur had fertile lands all along, because the water used to continuously flow. Now there is water sharing problems, so on and so forth. So that area is pretty much dried out. You have to look at for other sources of water. Tamil Nadu does not get continuous rain, but because of this Kaveri, it was always there. So that's the whole connect why he also built the dam, why that water was required when the water does not come from the northern part of the region back then, and so on. So that's the flow of water, flow of story.
Flow of the reasoning why the dam was built. Oh, how cool. Wonderful. Okay. So Josh, tell us. So now, what were your absolute highlights? Like if you had to think of one super highlight from where you would want to start our story about your entire trip and all that, what would be your wow moment?
So 2 wow moments. Though I had read a lot about Cholas, then just think of it as like 5-6 years ago, okay, before the movie. So we don't know anything about Chola, or we know it from our history books. I had a fair idea of who they were, what they have done. And I've heard a lot about the Brihadeshwara Temple Koil, okay, or Periya Koil, as they call it in Tamil. But when you see that for the first time, I guarantee you that you will be amazed at the structure and the size of it. I had the same feeling when I saw some of the churches in Rome, or when you go outside India, like the mosques in Turkey, you would see that huge structure, marvelous one. And like how Sangeetha mentioned, that back then there were no engineers, or we wouldn't call them engineers today, because they have learned their artwork by hand or by imagination, and with such intricately created humongous structures which stood its test of time. Here we are saying we should demolish an apartment in 40 years because it does not pass safety, and you have a temple which is 2000 years old. So yeah, those two. So one is the Periyakovil there, and the second one is the Madurai Meenakshi temple. That Madurai Meenakshi is like my favorite temple across India so far. I don't think another one stands its challenge. It's just too beautiful, very colorful, and the way the whole temple architecture is laid inside out is brilliant. Those are the two. Those are the two of my highlights in terms of what I saw.
Definitely starting with the Periyakovil. I have seen photos and videos, and I am also, oh my God, I'm waiting for this winters. I have to go once and see this place and come. The descriptions are just beautiful to see that, the whole thing, like you said, engineering of those times and how they managed to actually create this huge structure. It's phenomenal. So tell us about it.
Think of it that the topmost part of it, the Gopuram part of it, is carved off a single piece of stone, right? So they had to create a ramp to carry this piece of granite right on top of it, top of the Gopuram. And this ramp, according to historians, is about 6 kilometers long, so that it comes all the way onto the top. And the single stone which is there right on top right now is about 80 odd tons. And they had to take elephants to carry this stone all the way to the top. So imagine the weight of the elephants as well. How did they build that ramp? How did they manage to build all that out? And another interesting aspect is that they use granite for this, right? So granite is not available in about 60 odd kilometers radius from where the temple is currently standing. So a ramp of six odd kilometers was built to bring this on top, and then all the masonry work happened on top. Another interesting aspect is that there were no gelling materials or cement or anything used for this. They use some sort of an grid interlocking structure to get this stone in place. And it is done so well that, it has survived around 6 different earthquakes over this period of time. A bridge built in India this day does not last even a decade. And here is something that has lasted thousands of years. So all in all, an amazing architecture that one should see.
Yeah, very true. So, I've seen pictures which show that when you enter the temple and you look up, it's completely hollow. So the grid interlocking, like the jigsaw puzzle thing, you can actually make out when you go inside and look up all the way up, like towards the Gopuram. Yeah, it's very gorgeous.
And another thing which you can see is just because you said when you're looking from inside, I remember this. Think of it like something like a sort of a pyramid structure. So the shadow of the temple does not fall too much on the grounds. It's always in a very small radius because it is created in such a way that the shadow does not fall away from the temple itself. I don't know if that has a significance or not, but yeah, that's another interesting aspect to the temple.
Very magical, very magical.
Yeah, it's just another marvel. Back again, this is all my story is, and I keep saying back then, but back then when I went there, it wasn't crowded. And which is another thing that, there's such an amazing temple. It should ideally have tourists around the year. At least it should have tourists in the winter months. That's when I went, right? But you only have locals coming there. So locals are coming there, sitting on the grounds outside the temple, having a picnic, having their own meal, having a good time. And then they're going back. Maybe they visit the temple, maybe not, but they do that and then go home. But you don't see a lot of tourists there, which I liked it, but it's an unfortunate part of it, right? Like it's such amazing stuff that's out there, but it doesn't have the publicity it requires. I won't name names, but there are enough temples that I've seen in the northern part of India or other parts of India, which are crowded max, and people throng there. And here is something which is such an architectural marvel, but nobody knows about it, or even if they know, they don't give enough recognition that it deserves.
Yeah, I hope the movie makes it a difference, because there are now so many tours. When I started reading about it, I just generally put Ponniyin Selvan tours. So many of them popped up. I saw a group of moms and dads doing a religious tour of all the Ponniyin Selvan temples and all of that. But whatever, at least there has been something.
Yeah. So
at least it has started.
I think it recently got covered in Condé Nast as well. So it is starting to see a lot more visibility. Also because Southern India is not on the global tourist map. Anyone coming to India, they don't come to South India. And even if they come to South India, it's Kerala and not the other parts of the South India. So it's very difficult for someone to come all the way to Chennai and then start doing this tour. So I understand why it does not have that much of popularity, but I hope it changes soon.
True.
Also,
As a resident of Tamil Nadu, I may also add that there is a very narrow window in which people find the temperature hospitable, in which they can travel to the Brihadishwara temple and come back. So that also adds to this.
Which is true. And in that window, people would prefer to do the forts and palaces of Rajasthan and then check out Taj Mahal, because again, you can't do Taj Mahal in the month of May. So you do all that, then they don't have the time to come all the way down south. They would rather cover a couple of other interesting things in that area. So I understand where it comes from, but I really hope it changes.
Speaking of this engineering marvel, I just thought I'll also add one trivia. So the Nandi, right, in front of the gods, the Garbhagraha, is the second largest stone statue in India.
I've heard that this Nandi statue is also a monolith, like it's carved out of a single stone. Is that true, Sangeetha?
I don't know if it is carved out of a single stone. Perhaps it is.
It is. Yeah.
It's immensely huge.
Huge. Yeah.
The first time I went to Periyakovil, I was a child. I've made about more than 10 trips so far, I think, to Periyakovil. I have photographs of my children from the time they were crawling until the time they were very recently giving a guided tour to some of their friends who also came with us. So I have photographs of all of us. But I remember Nandi, my kids have run around and round and round and Nandi and played hide and seek and running and catching. It is immensely huge.
Huge. Yeah, true that.
It's a very big statue, and it's a beautiful. It's a
I think the largest is Lepakshi, though I may be wrong. I don't know if it's the largest or largest monolithic. One of those two is the one in Lepakshi. Once upon a time, I had this idea of having a bull temple run. So you have basically both the Brihadishwara temple have a decently sized Nandi. Then you have in Lepakshi, you have in Bangalore Bull Temple, you have in Hampi. You have a bunch of these humongous Nandi. I think it's 7 or 8. If I really don't recall the number. That's the number of good large Nandis that you have in southern India. Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
Should check it out. If you haven't gone to the Bangalore one, you should go.
Oh yeah, I've been to the Bangalore one. I've been to the Bangalore one and the Hampi one as well. It's really beautiful. So the Nandi in Periyakovil is not the Nandi built by Rajaraja Solan. Have you read about that?
Oh,
the main Nandi that we are talking about now, right? It's not built by Rajaraja Sola. This is the one that was later on built by the Nayakas. However, the Nandi that Rajaraja Sola built for the temple, there's a small one which is on a side corridor over there itself. This main one was not built by him, but built by the Nayakas later. The Nandi and the huge Mandapam, both. So there are so many stories around this whole Periyakovil or Brihadeshwara and all that. The first name that was given to the temple, the one that the king himself gave, it was called
Rajaraja
temple.
Very close. Rajarajeswaram. It's called Rajarajeswaram. Yeah. And then moved to Periyakovil, and then the Brihadeshwara came much later because it's like the great Ishwar of Brihadeshwar. The Marathas kept that name.
Oh.
So 3 rounds of names, but still people are very senti about it being called Periyakovil and all of that.
It's Tanjavur Periyakovil is the local name.
Yeah. So then what else was wow in the Periyakovil?
I'll go the other side. The inner sanctum and then right inside was all okay. Probably also because immediately after that I saw the Madurai one and that just blew me away. But outside, the artwork was really nice. One other thing which I didn't connect was we briefly touched upon that the Kailasanatha temple was the inspiration for this.
Yeah.
The Kailasanatha temple itself was one of the first proper Dravidian architecture temple, basically. So, or how they put it nicely, I think it's called first constructed temple or something like that. What they mean is that prior to that, it was mostly caves and wood structure. So this is the first time where they actually built a temple on kind of a flat land and then made it as a temple. So this was one of the first one. And then from there is this one's inspiration. So you can imagine temples prior to that would have been much more simplistic, like having an idol inside a cave kind of a scenario, or within a forest or whatever that is. So yeah, so that's the connect part of it.
Did you notice the Bharatnatyam postures inside and the lots of paintings, but those paintings were done later, I think. The Marathas and all of the Nayaks and Marathas and all of that, they did those paintings inside.
Stories say that they had a lot more which were looted or moved away and so on. But whatever is remaining shows their imagination of the gods and goddesses back then and their love for gods and goddesses back then. There's also another story where they say that this temple is large enough to hold the nearby cities. And so when an attack comes, it becomes kind of a fort, kind of a structure where everybody comes here and then you really can help them out until the siege is over and so on. Again, I don't know because I'm unable to verify sources for this, but yeah, that's another part of why these guys built temples. The history says these guys spent Cholas together across, I think, 4-5 centuries, built over 2,000 temples back then. So that's their love for their gods and their return for gods for all the wars that they win.
My God, 2,000 temples.
2,000
But then,
temples.
like you said, the temples also maybe probably work
it's
as forts as
multi-purpose.
well.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned about these art forms and sculptures, right? There's a very famous Tamilian Bharatanatyam dancer called Padma Subramaniam. So she was not only a great famous dancer, she was also a famous researcher. So when she was researching about all the different, how these emotions and gestures were represented in our Puranas, she is supposed to have used the architecture of the Periyakovil as the basis for one of her. I think she used 3 major temples and the Periyakovil is one of them as her basis for her research. So, which is also partly because it is one temple where most of the structures and if you see the art forms and the statues, they're all reasonably intact.
Oh yes, I've seen it in pictures and videos. There are like several depictions of the Bharatanatyam dance on the pillars of the temple.
Just for academic curiosity, the other 2 temples that Padma Subramaniam did refer to were the Chidambaram temple, the Nataraja temple in Chidambaram, which is of course extremely famous for the incredibly beautiful deity there. And the third is the Sarangapani temple in Kumbakonam.
Okay, so
then
then
George, just to also, I don't know when you last went. You said you went 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went in 2022 January last, and of course there's this giant board with the tags, which has a description of the history and when it was built and how it was built and all of that. And when I went last, my kids by then had understood how to download an audio tour on an Android phone, and they were listening to some local tour, which is available for free, and I don't know what they used, but I think it sort of gives people a sense of, I mean, if you're a tourist and if you're unfamiliar with the South Indian history, there are enough and more audio tours today available for free that you can download. And these were pretty short because my kids finished the whole round in some 15-20 minutes.
Oh,
got it.
Or so maybe they just put it on some 2x speed and quickly ran around and came. I can't say for sure.
Ideally, how long does it take? I mean, not if you're a historian, but for a tourist, you want to see the major things and you want to, just understand the overall story and all that. If you want to go through the entire Periyakovil, just the Periyakovil.
This is a very tough question.
Like mota.
No, I have a very simple answer to that. What time of the day and which month of the year?
Best case scenario.
5 a.m. winter.
That's what I'm telling you. So if you just want to see maybe like 15-20 minutes, like she said, half an hour to an hour is like great if you're a tourist and if you have other things to do. But there are people, like I told you, who come, put their blankets, sit down, chill, and then go. So it's like it depends on how much time you have and what you want to do before and post that kind of dictates your itinerary. But spending 30 to 60 minutes is fair, I guess.
It's fair. Oh, I thought you'll say like a couple of hours.
So when I went, we went most recently as 2 families. We had 4 kids between us, and all 4 kids were keen on climbing on every conceivable statue, playing hide and seek behind pillars. I think these are kids between 8 and 10 years of age at that point in time. We spent more than 2 hours there.
By the way, you know that this temple is actually called like a library as well, because in the bottom panel of the entire temple, you have a lot of inscriptions. These inscriptions are ideally the entire story of Rajaraja Chola, places he conquered, gifts and donations he received, all those kind of things which people would like to read and, get to know about his story, his history and all those things. And like I said earlier, I have like done one small PhD thesis on this entire, Sora stories and all of that. And so many of the YouTube videos that I actually saw had people who could read many of these inscriptions as well. Though the language is a really old version of Sanskrit and Tamil in some sections, but you can still read parts of it. It's so cool, no?
So that the other temple, the Airateshwara temple, the other part of the three large
third one,
temples,
yeah.
So that has a lot of these inscriptions written, but it's like a lot of stories written on the sides, and I find a lot of similarities between that and the structures in
Belur Halibut.
So the Halibut structures, the scriptures look similar, but that's just to my non-informative eye. Maybe it's like completely different, but that's how I look. It didn't read Tamil to me, but yeah, probably the Tamil language script itself has changed over a period of time.
Airavati, that is a third Sora living temple, right?
Yeah, we did one on the evening and the other two the next morning, and then we drove out. So that's how we had structured, and we were living in Kumbakonam for a couple of days, and then we did Kumbakonam temple also, and then these two. And Kumbakonam temple's interesting part is once you enter the temple complex, you again see a lot of shops in which also sells wares, but also a lot of food shops, which is where we had breakfast and dinner back there, because it is really good, authentic Kumbakonam South Indian food. Yeah.
What is authentic Kumbakonam South Indian food?
I mean, the taste, even though let's say if you're just eating idli and sambar, the sambar itself will taste different. So that. Oh yeah, the other one you should try if you go the route that I mentioned. So if you start at Kanchipuram, then you should have the Kanchipuram idli, which is that one wrapped in the leaf, and then you get the big one. So we also got it inside the temple itself, so it was a very different experience. But even if you don't get inside the temple, because it might not be available when you go there, you should eat it from any of the nearby places which sell idli. That idli itself is different. It has pepper, and yeah, it tastes very different.
Oh, interesting.
Because you were also talking about food when you travel. If you're traveling in the Tanjavur belt and in the Kumbakonam belt, I am told, I have no way to verify this, I am told that the paniyaram that is made in Tanjavur is still pretty much the same recipe that people have made over many centuries. I don't know if it is the same recipe that was made in the Sora era, that much I don't know. But paniyaram in Tanjavur is supposed to be the same. And the Chakra Pongal in any Vishnu temple, if you go, they'll usually give you a Chakra Pongal, which is why Sarangapani temple has that. That also is something that is very authentic to these regions. If you go there, you should definitely try these two foods.
How is Chakra Pongal different from normal Pongal?
Normal Pongal is called Ben Pongal, which is made, which is like salt.
Oh.
But Chakra Pongal is made with jaggery, so it's a sweet version.
Oh, okay.
Now, because you mentioned that places of stay may have expanded. We stayed on two different trips in heritage properties in and around Kumbakonam. So for us also, our place of stay has almost always been Kumbakonam only. We've actually never stayed in Tanjavur so far. Every time we've gone to the Periya Kovil also. The quality and the variety of heritage properties that are today available in Kumbakonam are incredible. You can in fact just go only to stay in that property and come back. They are that good. Several of these are either entire villages which have been renovated, or very old zamindars properties which have today been renovated to become heritage properties. And they can be quite pricey also. So you find properties right up to a 5-star resort mark in India to a slightly more 3-4 star level pricing also. So we have a range of staying options today.
Oh, that's wonderful.
If you go to that extent, then in Tanjavur itself, you have what is called a Swatma. That's one of the coolest one that you can live in. If you have the money to spend, that's where you should stay. It gives you a very different experience and so on.
But we didn't go that extent. I'm just saying for somebody who wants to, right? Even in the midpoint, we stayed in midpoint priced places. So, but the experience was incredible. So you're going to visit all these temples, and then you come back to a property which more or less looks and feels like something that is at least 600, 700 years ago. Those big houses with the sloping roofs, with an open courtyard in the middle,
Yeah.
You get that you continue to sort of live in that era, perhaps, with the amenities and comforts of modern day bathrooms and things like that.
Best of both worlds, kinds.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So that was Peria Koval. But George, while you were traveling, which one did you do first, and then which one came next while you were doing this tour?
We left late night from Bangalore. We reached Kanchipuram. We did the entire Kanchipuram. Then we drove towards Viranam Lake, and then we stayed that night there. And then we drove again down to Kumbakonam. So the distances are far. I mean, I'm saying it's so close, but the Tamil Nadu roads are just brilliant. So you can cover cities really fast. Yeah, so I think day 3 is when we reached Kumbakonam. So I think day 3 and 4 is where I did all these, or 4 and 5 is when I did all these temples.
The living Chola temples.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So then the Peria Koval was definitely one of your super duper highlights.
Yeah.
So then between the Gangaikonda Swarapuram and the Airavateshwar temple, which was the first one built by the beta and the second one built by the grandson, उन दोनों के बीच में तुमको कौन सा ज़्यादा wow लगा, and how can you recommend one of these to us?
I still like the Peria Koval the best. I don't know if I will lean to the other two at all. I think both seem equally good. Let me put it this way: if you have only time to visit one of the 3, just do the Peria Koval, and then you can skip the other 2. But if you have more time, then it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can do one or both. The stories are nice. There are a lot of architecture, again, a lot of art on the walls, on the temple walls, on the side walls, and so on. So you can spend a lot of time, especially if you have a
guided tour,
audio tour with you. Then you walk around, you listen, or you hire a good guide, one of these 2, and then you can spend some time there.
Do you get guides there, like people who will walk you through, tell you the stories and all of that? English speaking, yes. You do get good guides. You do get a lot of history aware guides as well. But it's the same hit and miss with any guides anywhere. So you really need to have someone who knows to convert the story into a fun way so that you remember the story later. But yeah, that's a hit and miss. So that you really can't do much. Yeah. So they say, for example, Rajaraja Sora built the first one with the inspiration from your
Kailasanath temple.
Kailas. So they say that Rajendra Sora took an inspiration from the Peria Koval and then built the Gangaikonda Swarapuram temple. So you do see similarities in the overall structure. Is that true, or how do you find it?
It is true, but again, I'm not the right person to comparing it in that form of sense.
For me, it's only Peria Koval.
Gangaikonda Sorapuram literally translates to a town where the Soras have brought the Ganges kinds. So Rajendra Sora wanted to bring the Ganga into South India and then built this Sora Gangam lake, right?
Gangaikonda Sorapuram is not that he brought Ganga to South India. He's called Gangaikonda Soran because he was the first person to have expanded the Sora Empire all the way up to the banks of the river Ganges in the north.
So I read the story that he wanted to bring the Ganga to Gangaikonda Sorapuram. And because he wanted to do that, the entire route was conquered. So the entire route from south all the way up to Bengal side and all of that was conquered all the way en route. And then he brought Ganga from there into this particular lake in Gangaikonda Sorapuram. And that's how the whole story of why Rajendra Sora got the title of Gangaikonda Sora, which literally means the Sora who conquered the Ganges.
So that lake is called Ponniyin Lake. So
Ponniyin Lake, correct.
Yeah, the story pretty much seems. Yeah, the funda is he got water from Ganga and poured it here. All the mythology part of it. He wanted to bring that. Yeah.
So the whole story is very Azimo Shan Shahenshah, that type.
See, that's the point. Azimo Shan Shahenshah. You don't know about this.
I don't know Ponniyin Selvan songs, man. I can't sing them, though. I just love the music, but I wish I knew the song. But yeah, that is true. I have seen Hrithik Roshan and Azimo Shan Shahenshah way more number of times. But there is no Hindi movie made except Ponniyin Selvan, right? There's no other nothing.
Not that
I know of either.
No, I'm very sure there'll be some old Tamil movies, but Bollywood, I highly doubt. By that logic, there are some incredibly awesome kings even in the Chalukya dynasty, or even in the Kalinga region.
Kalinga.
They're all great kings here. It's not like we've gone around making movies about
Oh,
any
yes.
of these people.
The
like
Konark temple and the Puri
Yeah.
and all that. Yeah.
The structure of the Konark temple is supposed to be quite similar to the structure in the Airavateshwar temple.
Airavateshwar temple. Yeah.
I
Huh?
have not
Yeah,
been.
there is.
Oh, it's like a chariot structure, right? So a chariot structure
Yeah.
with the wheels. So it's supposed to be very similar to Konark temple. Apparently, the wheels are also the sundials.
Yeah.
Oh, and they say that this temple was made even before the Konark temple. So this supposedly has the oldest ever chariot wheel sundial thing.
Oh, that's an interesting fact.
Mind blowing. So then, how easy was traveling between all these places for you, George?
Very, very, very comfortable. Very, very comfortable. The roads are good. You get good food everywhere. You get good South Indian healthy food everywhere. So you really don't have to worry about food, no worry about travel. So it was very comfortable. There was no, as long as you have a car and someone to drive it around, yeah, extremely comfortable.
We can't
Wonderful.
have public transport though.
I didn't explore, but if you are doing public transport, the public transport system is good in the southern parts of it, but you'd still do a lot of hopping. So you'll have to get to the main bus stand and then from there again figure out your way. So it'll be time, but if you have a lot of time on your hands, you should do that because then you get a lot more flavor of how the locals behave and so on. But if you're crunched for time, you have 6 days and you want to do a bunch of stuff, I wouldn't recommend it.
Is it easy for a North Indian to go and do like an entire tour with public transport as well?
I
So
won't
when you're saying North Indian,
generalize.
you really mean someone who can't speak Tamil, no?
Yeah, someone who's like really struggling out there, like.
So Hindi, English manage karna hai, right? You're saying.
Then how would they do it?
So if you are comfortable enough to accept their culture and then go there, and even with broken English, they will help you guide to teach places. But then the effort should come from you as against from them. So Tamil Nadu as such does not have a lot of tourist culture. For some reason, they've never invested into it. So it's very different from Rajasthan. You go to Rajasthan, that whole feeling is completely different. They really want you there because I think that's how that drives their GSDP or whatever. And similar with Kerala. You go to Kerala, you'll find people being a lot more, come to my town, come to my state, spend your money because that drives our economy here. Tamil Nadu is not like that. You will not find that hospitality, but you would really find them if you open up and say that I want to go to the Periya Kovil. You will find people, oh, you are coming from somewhere. Let me guide you. Yeah, go here, do this. Oh, it's 2:00. Maybe it's closed for entry. They'll give you such tips at that point in time. So you will find that coming. But yeah, the effort should be from you versus going to a touristy place. That's the difference I'd call out.
So broken English works.
Absolutely works.
In Tamil Nadu, English works.
In fact, as long as you start speaking in English or broken English, then they would start helping.
Okay, after finishing Periya Kovil and the other Chola temples, was your next destination Madurai or did you stop in between somewhere?
So as a part of, if you're going and truly as a part of these Ponniyin Selvan part of it, then probably you'd go like that and then you go further south. We had a detour towards Karnataka, that is a Chettinad area. We wanted to stay in a heritage place that Sangeetha was referring to before. So this is one of those old Chettiar mansion houses converted into a new fancy hotel. So we spent a night there where, it's like food of that area, of that region and so on. So you would not get the local feelings because outside it's like a deserted ghost town. There are very few things that you can do. That I think can be a separate discussion podcasting in itself, the entire Chettiar angle. It was just to give a glimpse, the place that we stayed, it had these huge pillars outside, wooden pillars, and I think it was rosewood. And back then, this Chettiar who owned this house lugged those two rosewood all the way from London. So,
what?
Yeah, so how he did it is he got onto the ship and he put those two trees behind the ship, and the ship came all the way to India. I don't know where they docked, but wherever, and then it came here, and then he created it, and then it's all. So it's just crazy the kind of wherewithal these entire
बहुत
Chettiars
पैसा है,
had,
बहुत पैसा
yeah,
है.
they pretty much rule the entire money angle. Think of them equivalent to Jews of that side or whoever. It is just that big.
Yeah,
If you watch Kandu
deserves a
Kandu
full thing.
movie, that the house that comes in that also is one of the houses here.
Oh, how lovely. And then post this was Madurai.
Last stop was Madurai. Yeah.
Madurai.
Food in Madurai is something that you should definitely try, whether you're vegetarian or non-vegetarian. There are a plethora of options and extremely cheap. You should definitely get out and try. It's a very, very different kind of taste for anything that you eat there.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Madurai also has a mention in the Ponniyin Selvan books written by Kalki, right?
Madurai is where the Pandyanad is, or the erstwhile capital was.
No, nothing happens in the story in Madurai. It's merely mentioned, like George said, as referred to as the place where the Pandya Empire was headquartered.
Okay.
No events of the story happened. But if you wanted to continue the tour, and especially if you're traveling with kids, or I mean, even as an adult, if you have some interest in birds, and if you go all the way down to the Kodikarai beach, which is mentioned in the movie, I mean, many things happen in Kodikarai, right? Which is where Vandiyadevan gets on a boat along with Pungarali and goes to Lanka. So that beach also has there's a very beautiful bird sanctuary there. So, while you I don't know what you can do after you reach a place which has a very beautiful beach. Yeah, you can explore the beach certainly, but it is not like the beaches of Goa. So after that, if you're twiddling your thumbs and figuring out what to do, there's a very nice bird sanctuary also nearby for you to spend part of the day. And the lighthouse that features in the story, for people who've read the book, you may have read the word, the Kodikare Kalangar Vilak, which means a lighthouse. It's still there, the lighthouse they're talking about. Not the exact same lighthouse that was built in the Sora era, but you'll find a lighthouse there. But at least you'll get that feeling of probably meeting Pungurali there and things like that. It is also a place where you'll find a lot of mangroves. So if, when you think about it, in the book, this scene comes out. I don't remember if the movie captures it. So when Pungarali saves Vandiyadevan and Arunmozhivarman, and when they have to bring them quietly without anybody's knowledge, she actually manages to guide her boat through the mangroves to reach that monastery in Nagapattinam. So you can also find those mangroves, and there are boatmen who will still take you around. Not exactly the same routes as the book may have covered, but you can also explore that. Again, try and go only in the winter months. It will be scorching hot if you try boating in the...
What's the name of the place again?
Kodikarai.
Kodikarai.
In English, it's Point Calumet. It has the old Chola lighthouse. It also has, I think there's something to do with the Ramayana part of it. So read up. So this is the place where when Rama was going towards Sri Lanka, he had stopped by Point Calumet Beach. Mangroves, if you really want to explore, you should go to Pichavaram. That's the other.
Yeah,
Pichavaram
is certainly there, but
I know, I understand why you connected it, but I'm just telling you, this may or may not be like the best mangrove boat experience, but since it's in the same zone as you're coming from Kanchipuram down south, you can just stop by at Pichavaram for an afternoon and go take that boat.
What about the other very significant thing in the movie, that Parayare and the Kadambur?
Parayare and Kadambur, two things I didn't explore. I think Kadambur is in ruins. Parayare, I don't even know where it is. So I don't know.
So every Ponniyin Selvan store definitely stops at Parayare at some point, because it used to be the Chola capital before it moved to Tanjavur. And as per one of the old names that it had, it was known as the land of 1,000 temples. And as per records, the Princess Kundavai used to live here in the palace at Parayare.
Yeah, absolutely. Parayare was actually the scene where Vandiyadevan meets Kundavai Devi the first time. I mean, and they fall in love, like Aankho hi, Aankho mein, and all that happens just in Parayare itself. And then we get to see the large palace of Parayare. Kadambur is also one of the main palaces of the Chola Empire. And Kadambur is a place where, in the first part, we actually see Vandiyadevan spying on the set of conspirators who are conspiring on who's going to be the next king.
that entire scene is actually the Kadambur Palace. And now to think that the palaces of both Padyare and Kadambur are in complete ruins, it's really sad. In fact, Godly and me, we were doing our research and we actually saw a couple of YouTube videos where people have actually gone to these places. I don't know, George and Sangeetha, if you guys actually went looking for these, but apparently there are these guys who are very curious. They went to look for remnants of these palaces and they could just see bricks. That's about it. And that too, they had to search and dig and they found it few feet under the earth, and they knew it were these kind of bricks because the bricks used in the Sora Empire were a little longer in length and shorter in breadth and things like that. And that's how they found out that these were the bricks that were used for the palace construction. And now there is absolutely nothing there. It's all stolen, it's taken away, and it's in complete ruins. I mean, I wouldn't call it ruins, it's just not there at all. So it's really unfortunate.
And it's so sad to hear about that, because George was also mentioning like how a lot of tourists go visit the northern part of our country. Like Jaipur has so many palaces which are still standing so strong, right? And to hear that there's nothing to see about those palaces like we saw in the movie. It's kind of sad.
Quite sad, yeah. But he can take a baki cheeze bhi hai. You guys should go to these places. You have a lot of temples, land of 1,000 temples. There are many more still remaining. So go check them out. It's really nice.
Right.
Something that I was very fascinated after I had read Ponniyin Selvan novel was, what could have been the sources that the author Kalki himself used. So from what I have read, I'm not sure if this is comprehensive. Okay, so Kalki himself references a few things as source material for us to understand the true history of the Soras. One of them that he keeps referring to are the copper plate inscriptions that have been excavated in that era. So he refers to the Anbil copper plates and the Tiruvilangadu copper plates in the book, if you've read them. So these copper plates were very important sources of information for any archaeologist and historian. Most certainly somebody like Kalki, who must have tried finding out what could have been the real story around which he could have created a fictional novel like Ponniyin Selvan. The Tiruvilangadu copper plates, they are 31 in number. And the first bunch of copper plates were written in Sanskrit, which will start with, paying some kind of homage to a deity or a god, which will be followed by a description of the genealogy of the king. So the Tiruvilangadu copper plates were issued by Rajendra Solan. So he would have gone on to describe who his father was, a grandfather was, an uncle was, and all of that. So we know who ruled after whom, and the source for that is this Tiruvilangadu copper plates. And the subsequent part of the copper plates, then they jump into Tamil as a language, where they talk about everything we want to understand about how governance must have happened in that era. These copper plates become a very important source of information for any historian. I think interesting for us to know that if somebody wanted to see these copper plates today, as part of your Ponniyin Selvan tour, you could go to. There is Leiden in Europe, which is where most of the Tiruvilangadu copper plates today sit. So Leiden is in Netherlands. So in fact, some people even refer to them as the Leiden plates. That is one place you can go to. Apparently, there are 5 copper plates with Rajendra Sola's seal that you can find in the Government Museum in Chennai. A seal of Rajendra Sola's empire with the tiger. And if you see the movie, you will remember the scenes where there are those huge warships with the tiger, as a face on their flags. You'll find a similar tiger as an inscription on the seal. You can find it in the Government Museum.
Sangeetha, as you were talking, I just went up on Google and just checked out images of these copper plates and the seal that you were talking about. They look really, really cool. So listeners, definitely go and check out pictures of these Tiruvilangadu copper plates and the seal and all of that. We'll link up everything in our blog. I'm sure you'll love them.
So there has been an excavation at the site near Madurai. So if you're near Madurai, you can definitely check this out. There's this museum called Kiradi or Kiladi, which has a lot of Pallava ruins to it. And if that's not all, it's an excavation site. You can actually visit that excavation site to see how ruins are discovered or like artifacts are discovered. So if you're near Madurai, I would recommend maybe visit this place once.
Very
While
nice.
we are talking about ruins, I think there's unfortunately even that Buddhist monastery, the Chudamani Viharam that comes, there's reference in the book. If you did go to Nagapattinam, you probably will only end up seeing ruins of even that Buddhist monastery. Unfortunately, I don't think that monastery exists as a monastery any longer.
Hey, tell me something, from the book, from all the touring around all these temples and all that, how much of this Vandiyadevan character do you actually get to know more about? Like, he's the main dude in the entire movie, right?
From my very limited understanding of when Kalki was doing his research about for the sake of the book, and Kalki was one of those who definitely did a reasonable amount of research, even to find out about this character called Vandiyadevan, who is hardly a very well-documented character in the annals of history. I think there is exactly 1 or 2 sentences in the Tanjavur temple where there's an inscription where they do mention that Pallavarayar Vandiyadevar was his wife was the great Kundavai Devi, and she was the consort. So he pretty much used couple of lines there as his source material and built this giant of a character who's captured the imagination
My
of
hero,
millions of people.
yeah, for the movie, he's my number one hero.
Oh, in the even in the books, he is the
Protagonist.
protagonist through whose eyes we see the events unfolding.
My God, such a well-researched book. At the end of all these travel podcast recordings, I get FOMO ki mujhe wo jagah jana hai. Now at the end of this, I'm also getting the FOMO ki book bhi padna hai. My goodness.
So Kalki also published a travelogue after he had visited Lanka. He's supposed to have made 3 trips to Lanka to understand what life was like, what the terrain is like. So he speaks about what it was like to meet people then, who are Tamilians who had moved out of Tamil Nadu to work in the plantations. But beyond that, he only talks about how there are large forest lands. I mean, the way he describes Kandy and Colombo then. And I had visited Kandy and Colombo, I think about 4-5 years ago. I don't think there's a lot of connection. So as part of your Ponniyin Selvan tours, if you really did want to go to visit parts of Ceylon, you may have to go to areas in northern Sri Lanka, which are substantially forested regions. And I'm not very sure how safe that is today.
Okay.
No, that's also pretty much whitewashed now. The northern and the eastern part of it, though I really want to visit it sometime, but you have very few things from the past which is still continuing today. So yeah, that's you just see it because you need a closure of that part. I don't think it would be as what we want it to be like.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Even Cholas themselves plundered that entire part. So the northern and the eastern Sri Lanka, when the Cholas came in, they destructed that entire zone. They made it more Chola-like, and then they were ruling there. And then these guys got independence from Chola after 3 centuries, and so on. So there's like a lot of things that have changed over a period of time. So whatever we imagine about Ponniyin Selvan is not there, even during Chola time. And now we are talking about 1,000 years after that. So yeah, it's very, very different.
Oh, you're talking of like the generations after itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they refer to this place called Anuradhapura, which has multiple different kinds of ruins. I think that itself is, I think, from a different generation than the Chola or before. And the Chola
themselves, a different place altogether.
No. What I mean is that it has undergone so many changes that what we see now is not even what is there in Chola, which itself is not there from the erstwhile Lanka, Elankai or whatever. So it has undergone changes multiple times. So what we see now is, I don't know which generation it is now.
Which place's name you said this is?
Anuradhapura.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Cool. George, anything else that you would like to add on from your experiences of going around?
No, yeah, I think most of the things that I wanted to throw in, I've pushed it out. I don't think there's anything that I've missed or I can recollect. I am pretty sure if once Aarti hears this, she will.
I know she'll say, "Oh my God, George, you didn't say that. Why did you miss this?"
Yeah, she'll have a different thing. You can put an addendum at the end saying that here are the 5 things that we didn't cover, and here it is.
And Sangeetha, we know that you've been to this entire region so many times.
So मुझे कुछ ना some हटके वाले suggestions of where we can go, where our listeners can go and experience something new, fresh and things like that.
So Ponniyin Selvan tour, if one were to undertake, one of the most amazing things about the tour would be you would get to see monuments that are more than 1,000 years old. But the unfortunate thing is that there are many places which feature in the story which don't exist today. And by and large, these are the palaces that feature in the story, whether it is the Kadambur Palace or the Tanjavur Palace, where so many interesting events take place. Unfortunately, these have been destroyed by the armies of the subsequent dynasties that came following the Sora era. But still, there are many places that are very interesting for us to visit for their natural beauty, which we can add to, as part of doing a tour like this. Because usually you're not going to visit the same place twice over with two different perspectives. You're not going to go all the way to a place like Nagapattinam or Kodikarai once because I want to visit places that feature in the story. So might as well combine a few things together. So if you keep that in perspective, in today's day and age, one way to maybe do this tour is, if you were to travel from Chennai, you could go to Mahabalipuram, which is a very quick stop. And from there, you could go to the Veeranam Lake. And from there, another half an hour is the Gangaikonda Sorapuram, which is today a very tiny village. But about 1,000 years ago, it was the seat of one of the most powerful empires of South India. So Rajendra Soran established his capital in Gangaikonda Sorapuram. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Center. You can see a very beautiful temple there, like George had mentioned earlier. And from there, you could go to the Tanjavur temple, which is about a 90-minute drive from Gangaikonda Sorapuram. And from there, so you could visit the Kiradi Museum and the archaeological site. And from there is the Kodikarai. And from there, you could visit Nagapattinam, but you will see nothing of the Buddha monastery, unfortunately. But speaking of the source of this, it is mentioned in one of the copper plates that, one of the Sora kings had donated to build this Buddha Viharam in Nagapattinam. So again, that is well recorded in history and unfortunately doesn't exist today. It's substantially in ruins. You could take a boat ride along the mangroves near Kodikarai. It's not the Sundarbans, but it's still a mangrove boat ride. I'm sure any of us would like to. This is a kind of a trip where you can see multiple different things, right? You're seeing some beautiful temples, a dam. You'll get to see a bird sanctuary, an archaeological dig. And you, in most of these places, you will also get to savor some reasonably authentic food. This is a trip where you can really try the native paniyaram and chakra pongal that I was talking about, and it will be a delight for multiple senses in that sense. In fact, the chakra pongal and the curd rice I was talking about in Sarangapani temple is something we can get as part of prasad. So you don't have to be penny for it at all.
साल में एक ही बार जा सकते हैं यार. Everything have to do in December, December.
And that is the best time to go other parts of the countries also. Right? So it's difficult. You'll have to bear the heat and go one time, but
I will die. Alrighty. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome, George. So there's one last question I'd like to ask you. In my style of travel, I usually like to have a one-day do-nothing day, where you don't have an agenda. So in your do nothing day, if that is your style of travel as well, which I kind of know it is, but for our listeners, how do you spend your do nothing day?
Got it. I mean, for listeners who travel or who like to travel but have never put in this do nothing day, I highly recommend you start doing it. You should have a one day in your favorite city. Just have a day which you do not have an agenda. But what I mean is that you do not have, morning I will visit a gallery and the evening I'm going to go for this pub or nothing like that. You just that 12 hours or 8 hours is just left open. So that's context for you. One of the big things that I would always do when I go outside of my hometown or my own city, to find out how the locals live their life. What do they do? How is it? And how is, especially, is it different from how I live my life? Maybe it's the same. And if it's the same, then I change my tack. But if it is not, then I would like to do what they do. So, which means that I might get into a cab or something and then ask the driver, where do you eat your breakfast? Like, tell me a place where you like to go for your breakfast. It might, if it's in India, let's say they have their favorite paratha shop or a chole bhature shop, which they know and not many travelers might know. It's not that famous blog list. And then you go there, you eat that, and then you see if you can start up a conversation with someone there, and then you pick the trail, and then you go to the next and the next and the next. That's one way that I would love to do. The second could be find out if that city has something to do with sports. It could be any sport, right? It needn't be the one that I follow. And then if there's a match scheduled on any of those days, then I try to book my free day there, so that I can go, even if I'm not able to attend the match, or there would be fun festivities around that stadium, around that place of the arena, go and talk to them, have a chat with the fans, absorb that vibe. Third is, if you're in a student town, then that is really good, especially if it's on a Friday or a Saturday evening. You just go there and then you can just do people watching the entire evening. And the amount of things that you can learn and absorb from their culture, especially, that's two different ones. One is the culture of its current generation, and then second is the culture of the student population in that city. That's again something that you would learn a lot just by sitting and watching and drinking a cup of coffee. Yeah, some of the things that I'd like to do in my do nothing day.
Oh, I love people watching. It's so fun.
I love people watching for my sketches. I have to admit that. If not on my vacations or do nothing days, but there are times when I would randomly pick my sketchbook, go sit at the beach or at a cafe just to watch people and sketch them. So while I'm on a vacation, sometimes I like to listen to podcasts other than listening to music, of course. Sangeetha, since you are one of our favorite podcasters, and I know that you also love listening to podcasts, so would you share some of your favorite podcasts that you highly, highly recommend? And also, please talk about what's new today, the kids podcast that you host.
Podcasts, I'm a bit of a boring podcast consumer. While I do consume a lot of podcasts, mine is mostly information based. So my morning begins with BBC, and then I move on to a line of podcasts which are all about business and financial news. I listen to during the course of the day whenever I'm driving, or if I'm in the kitchen, or if I'm gardening. Apart from these, one of my great favorites amongst podcasts is the podcast called Stuff You Should Know, which is not about any one particular genre. So they take any topic under the sun and they discuss. And I really enjoy listening to that one podcast. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, this is a new one. I haven't heard about this podcast before.
For example, take a topic like slime molds. It sounds very obscure, right? But slime molds were supposed to have been the basis on which the entire metro system of Tokyo was modeled. So I don't know if you're shocked hearing that. I recall hearing on an episode about slime molds that researchers, they grew some slime molds on a petri dish, and they placed all the nutrients that the slime molds needs to feed itself on the petri dish, and the location of the nutrients resembles the population centers of Tokyo. So when they let the slime mold grow on the petri dish, the shape it took to reach all the nutrients on the petri dish, that shape was used as the basis on which the Tokyo's metro system was designed, because that shape was found to be the most optimal, both in terms of time taken to reach all the population centers and the least cost involved.
I'm gonna head straight and check out this particular podcast. I know that I've saved it because thanks to your recommendation, but I need to check out this episode, especially since it's also about Tokyo.
While you're on the topic of podcasts, I do suggest that you should check out the kids podcast that I host, which is called What's New Today. But yeah, for those of our listeners, I will shamelessly speak about the podcast I host and promote it in the hope that some of you might find it very interesting. So I host a podcast called What's New Today, and in which I chat with children and I get their perspectives on what they think about the current events in the real world, which could be anything about the Ukraine war, or it could be about a Marvel movie. the most incredible thing is the perspectives that children can come up with can be so bizarre and so different from what you and I think is correct. They will have no compunctions in being politically incorrect also. They'll be absolutely honest with their opinions and views. So for those podcast listeners who are heavy duty podcast listeners, or who get a lot of your information about what's going on in the real world from traditional hosts, this might be an excellent way for you to get a grounded view of what today's children think about the world that you and I create. So you will 100% get 5 laughs in a span of 5 to 10 minutes. Our episodes are really short. I keep it quick and quirky. So while you're at it, you should definitely check out What's New Today also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google, or wherever you're listening to podcasts.
Yes, even though I'm a full-fledged adult, I have to admit that I love What's New Today, especially the unconventional way how you bring up new facts, wildlife stories, jokes, trivias, and of course, how different children has different perspectives on the weirdest news that I've ever seen.
So I'm an avid podcast listener as well, and I really enjoyed your recommendation, Sangeetha. I have heard What's New Today before. It's a fabulous podcast. So for our listeners, we'll link up all of these in our show notes and in our blog. So definitely go and check them out. Well, guys, this has been great fun. I really enjoyed hearing all your fun day on the entire Ponniyin Selvan trail. In fact, researching for this episode also was great fun. You know, I've always loved reading about such historical saga. मुझे तो लगता है मैंने एक mini PhD ही कर लिया है. अब बाकी I'll have to go and do the whole trail myself to actually make my PhD theoretical thesis into something practical kinds. So thank you so much, guys. This was amazing, awesome fun.
Thank you, guys. It was absolutely awesome chatting with all of you. I had an opportunity to reminisce many parts of my travels to these places of historical prominence over many years of childhood. I think as we were recording today, and when I got an opportunity to share some of these stories, all those childhood memories have come right back flashing into my head.
So cute. Okay, so for our listeners, for all the detailed itinerary, the pictures for your references, and a lot of secret tidbits, the entire detailed things are in our blog, The Sneaky Footprints, link of which is in our description below. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much then, guys. See you then.
Thank you.
Cheers. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, in case you're still wondering, we are Misadventures of a Sneaker, a travel podcast where our sneakers take you everywhere, from breathtaking landscapes to quirky roadside attractions.
Yo, do follow our Instagram page, Misadventures of a Sneaker. You know, we put lots of things there, recommendations, photographs, stories, experiences, and a lot more. And you can also drop us a DM there with a lot of your suggestions, places that you want our sneakers to take you next, and lots more.
All details are in our show notes. And do not forget to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify. We'd be thrilled to see you on our next adventure.
You mean misadventure?
Yeah. Hope to see you on our next misadventure.
Our sneakers will take you on the next misadventure. So see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.